Hi, I'm John D. Arman with the Coquille Valley Sword Group, and today we're going over Article 6, the gaze. So, let's begin. The gaze. A lot was said about the gaze in earlier time. These days, it's taught that the gaze should be directed, in general, to the face of the opponent. With regard to the gaze during combat, both eyes should be made narrower than in everyday life, and the opponent should be calmly observed. Thereby, it is important that you see the opponent with unmoving eyes, as if he were far away, even if he is very close. With this gaze, you can not only perceive the beginning of techniques of the opponent, but also see both sides. There are two kinds of gaze, namely the recognizing gaze, kan, or the observing gaze, ken. In combat, the first should be held strongly and the second weakly. There is also a gaze that shows your opponent your mind. For this reason, you should only direct your own external, intentional spirit, kokoro, at the eyes of the opponent, but under no circumstance your own internal decision-making spirit, Shin no kokoro. This should be carefully observed. So, kind of a bit here to digest. So, we start off by comparing what is commonly taught to what Musashi is about to sort of teach. Now, in many schools, it is considered sort of taboo to talk about other styles, the goings-on in other styles, or their technical work at all. And with good reason. In fact, it is a rule that is quite common in Keppan, in the blood oaths that different schools take when you're sort of initiated into it. But in Hyoho, it is our tradition to really look at other schools, to see how they're doing things, not only so that we can take what's useful. In other words, if somebody came out tomorrow and they say, oh, well, I've got this cut, it does all the things that good cutting does before, and all the things that your current cut does, but more, then we would sort of unilaterally switch to it. Which is not necessarily common in Koryu, right? Or Koryu practitioners and the inheritors that take over the style tend to be very rigid in how they keep their work, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're looking at it from sort of a historical preservation sort of sense. But then again, there are many different types of Koryu practitioners as there are Koryu, so it's hard to sort of generalize them. But suffice it to say, in Yoho, it is our tradition to look at other styles and to compare them against our own. The other benefit of this is it oftentimes helps us to sort of elucidate our method and why we do the things we do, or to highlight things that we do as being important because of their difference. Which is not to say that you want to do something just for the sake of being different, but rather that it's worth mentioning because it's different from the normative sort of experience, whatever that is. So he goes and he says right away, hey, in his time, people are generally taught, look at the face of the dude, right? This is pretty straightforward logic, not really a fault in that. In Yoho, we don't tend to use this sort of narrowed vision, but we'll talk about that more in a moment when it comes up. So, next section, he says that your eyes should be made narrower than in everyday life. I have no clue why this is. Right? This was not something that was ever explained to me in my training, and though I have my own theories on it and kind of a lot of different ideas about why this could be, because I don't know the sort of direct transmission, I'm not going to speak on it. The second part, however, is pretty clear, that calm observation. A lot of times, especially when you have a plan in a fight, you hunt that too rigorously. You want to win it too bad. Let's use an example. So, let's say that I'm working with a dude, and the piece of work that we're doing is some kind of, I don't know, a throw, let's say. And so I'm looking at this dude, and I'm going, okay, well, I know what I want to get, and he's my training partner, he knows what I want to get too, but because I want to get that specific throw, maybe it's a neck and shoulder throw, right? And I want to get that so bad, I focus in on it, and I'm observing very aggressively, right? I want to get it. My focus comes in sharp, and I'm really sort of just driving with my intent, looking for that right moment to hop in, clinch up, and do the nasty. The problem is, the problem that's being addressed in this section right here is that it shuts off your vision to sort of what else is going on. Like, when you look at something expecting to find something, you generally will, but oftentimes at the cost of missing things that were also going on at the same time. People who get in fights on the internet should understand this well. Anyway, so in Yo, we ascribe to the sort of inzan no metsuke, eyes of the distant mountain, to relax your vision in the same way you do when you're looking at things that are very large and very far away, and to keep this kind of relaxed, perceiving vision open and large the whole time, because that's our strategy. Now, from there, he moves right in to talking about sort of the two types of visions, ken and kan. Now, this has been translated here as the recognizing gaze and the observing gaze. And that can be a little hard to understand. Basically, kan is that inzan no metsuke. It's that peripheral vision. It's that large view. It's and we talked about this a lot in the Kihon videos about how you use your eyes. But there is a host of scientific literature that shows that using that sort of perception-based vision, whether it's the rod or the cones, I always get them confused. You pick up things like motion and contrast much faster than with ken, your observant gaze, the gaze that you use to analyze something. So when you pick up your cell phone and you look at it, you're using your analyzing gaze, right? You're going, okay, that is a letter, this is a letter, that's a letter. Together they make this word, and this word means this, right? Whereas kan would be if you saw your cell phone light up from across the room because you got a message, right? Does that make sense? So, big vision, good for fight. Little vision, bad for fight, right? Pretty simple, pretty easy. Now, this next part is another one of those things that people kind of can get confused on. The intentional spirit and the decision-making spirit. The external spirit versus the internal spirit. I no kokoro versus Shin no kokoro. I no kokoro, in this instance, this external spirit, the what you are communicating to your opponent, what your eyes give away, should be just like kan, right? It should be a big, wide view. In other words, if some guy, starts putting up hands or goes to draw down on me, any information that he can get from looking at my face and at my eyes and how I'm looking at him and his form should tell him that he is about to get a beating, right? There should be no mistake that my intention is to drop the dude, right? But, and this is the important distinction here, at no point should the way I'm looking and the way I'm observing him give away how I intend to do it. Grizzly dog is having a dream. So, going back to that example of me trying to get sort of a neck throw, if my vision is staring at his arm and shoulder the whole time, I'm kind of watching him, I'm kind of batting him, I'm really sort of keyed on that, he doesn't have to be psychic to know what I'm going after, right? It is not what it first may sound like some mystic psychic transmission, right? It's your opponent's ability to observe that, hey, I've got a knife and he's staring at the knife. He intends to work on what he's staring at, right? Because the mind directs the head, directs the face, directs the body, right? So if you look at where a person's body and face and eyes are pointed, you know what they're thinking about, right? Again, it's super, super simple, and you can observe it in everyday life. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world. And it doesn't have a need for some sort of supernatural element to it. Again, not saying that there aren't supernatural things, but this non-direct transmission is not one of them, right? So, they should be able to see that you're going to work, right? But not specifically how. Now, we talk about this in the Go Rin No Show, and I'm pretty sure in a couple more articles here in the Heiho Sanjugo Kasho, where they discuss specifically how to manipulate these two, to in turn manipulate your opponent's perception, to manipulate their counteraction. In other words, like fainting but without moving. Makes sense? Maybe not. Right? This is hard to observe sometimes in training when you are Shidachi, when you're the good guy in the kata, or when you're the junior student who is receiving education, right? But once your roles shift and you're in charge of sort of being the senior student to somebody else, you're feeding them attack, you're feeding them work, then this distinction will become very clear and very obvious. Because you'll watch them and they'll go from, good inzan no metsuke, whether they're working open-handed or with weapons or whatever, and they'll start going, okay, we're studying this technique, so I'm going to wait for him, I'm going to wait for it, there it is, and they pounce on it, right? So, that's how you can kind of quickly observe it in the context of a fight, but people are literally doing this all of the time in everything they do in their life, which is kind of why it's hard to observe. So we'll go ahead and say, if you want to know more, you got to pick up a sword and go train.